put on my glasses, because that's what I do now. And I think you should have an output now. Yes, good. Okay. All right. Let me grab this. You can tell by you think I should be American, right? Well, I sound a bit American, as I've been in America for 22 years. And I went there because I used to work in the theater, actually, and I was telling some people that Jane and everybody last night that I last came here, but it was, is the sound all right on this? Does it sound good? Okay, with a theatre company, playing at the Theatre Royal here in Newcastle. So my roots are from the theatre. And I got to work on a film called Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And it came out of the blue to me. It was a call. Somebody needed somebody to manage and put together a group of artists around Richard Williams, who actually directed the animation for the film. And the animation studio was created in London to do to Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and I was asked to run that studio. And it was in the heart of that I suddenly had this extraordinary career change for me. But I've always gone back to my theatre roots and remembered that what great animators do and what great stories do, it doesn't matter whether it's a play or a movie or anything else. It always comes back to the heart of it, which is story, which is what we're going to talk about this morning. So I've got a little thing here that I can press slide. So hopefully it will change. Did it change? Yeah. Oh yeah, look, there's, I have an add to that because, Jim, I think you said I'm going to tell everybody how much to charge for it, for your idea. I think that's a great one. Don't let me get away without telling you that, although I'll bullshit you, actually, if you'll pardon my French, because I'm not sure there really is an answer to that. What we're going to talk about today is all the do's and don'ts. I don't know where a great story comes from. If I really knew that, there's some chemistry that has to happen, but it has to come from a great idea. So, let's have a look. So what is a pitch? Well, I think that's the first thing. A pitch could be you have booked an appointment. You are somewhere. You're lined up. You got all your materials together. You've been given a time slot, and you're in the room, and you've set it up, or they're coming to you, coming to your studio, you're going to them. But equally, it could be walking down the hallway. It could be just brushing into somebody, just being ready in that moment. You suddenly, for the boys, you're suddenly standing in a room that girls don't go into, or shouldn't, or don't usually, and somebody's beside you. And if there was that opportunity, you could just take it. So I always think, what is a pitch? A pitch is really what is an opportunity, and take it. Don't let it go. But we'll get deeper into that. So, and I want to also, oh, I know what I did. I pressed the wrong button, Richard. You told me if I did that, that would happen. I just added the word Hollywood because I just want to try and give a little bit of a Hollywood flavor to this. It's really where my career has gone, because after Roger Rabbit, I was given an opportunity to move to America, and it was the right time in my life, and who wouldn't take that opportunity? I was going to go for a couple of years and ended up staying, now well over 20 years there. So really my experience in animation is very much, from the point of view of the American studios. And I think, it's still trying to get an understanding of that. The true success, comes through the big American studios. I think it's one of the tragedies of the British film industry that somehow years ago we didn't really take on distribution. It was all about making the films. It was never about marketing and distribution. And what the Americans have done so outstandingly is distribution and marketing. They control it. They control the end of it. It's ironic that the first money that comes out, when you go pay your money to go and see a film, and half the money normally goes to the theatre, and the other half to the distributor. The distributor takes all his costs first. He takes all his money for all the advertising. That's the last money to be put in, and it's the first money out. And then when that's repaid, then the money starts to come back to the filmmakers and the actual cost of actually making the film itself. So I always thought America's been just stunning at that concept of taking that on. Anyway, I digressed there. Let's move it on. All right. So these are the three things we have to remember. This is incredibly cute, but incredibly true. And for all of you, I think the majority of people here, you know, a lot of artists here, a lot of people who dream of actually the physicality of making something. But what you have to do is just push all that away. Don't get caught up in image. Certainly don't get caught up in technology, in new software, in some sort of program that can do something. It's not that they're not necessary. They're incredibly necessary. What we do in animation is transcend time with our films. I mean, I showed you clips of films that I got to work on. I didn't make any, by the way, I didn't make any one of those films. I contributed to them in terms of management, story development, and all sorts of different ways, but I didn't make them. But what's interesting about an animated film is that it transcends time. And in fact, it was a moment that came to me when I took my daughter to see a re-release of 101 Dalmatians. It was not the live action film, it was the animated film. And as a kid, that's a film I can remember being taken to. And I suddenly watched my daughter, who was at the time probably 4, watching this film that was made when I was probably 8 or something. And I got goosebumps because it was just such a revelation that there was something that was entertaining another generation, but it wasn't an antique in any way. And as I've been able to show you films today and talk about films today, that I'm pretty sure that you have a knowledge of many of them. Now I could say that you're fans, you're in the industry, it's part of what you do need to know. But I can go talk to many, many people and mention Lion King and films like that, and it will transcend time. They don't date. We could sit here today and we could take the films from, you know, Snow White all the way through all the Disney classics, and most of the titles you've heard of. You may not know, and probably don't know the exact order in which they were made, but that demonstrate these films can live on beyond what a live action film can be, and I think it makes it the most exciting medium. And putting a business hat on, also the most profitable. It has great opportunities in terms of licensing of the product itself, you know, products derivative of the story, DVD sales, and just the longevity of it. I mean, there's still Little Mermaid toys in the store. There's Little Mermaid shows and all sorts of things. So, know your audience. Know your audience. I think it's really important you know, and I'm talking about an audience from several points of view here. We want to know our audience from the studio. Who are you pitching to? You're going to pitch a story. Who is it? Who's it for? Who's in the room? Try and do some research about who it is you're going to talk to. The consumer. Now remember, you're developing a film and a story idea that's, if you're lucky, is going to see the light of day in 3 years' time. So let's be very aware of just trying, you know, be smart about that. All right. So that's the follow-up to that. So be original. Do be original. Try and find it. And it's hard sometimes. Everything's a derivative of something else, right? But in original idea, you know, we took, let's do the Iron Giant. I mean, we took a classic piece of children's literature, completely unknown in the United States, of course, Ted Hughes's wonderful children's book, written after the death of Sylvia Plath. He told it to his children as a children's story. The motivation behind the story was that he tried to create something that the rebuilding of the giant is symbolic of rebuilding the family unit. We optioned the book. We developed it with Pete Townsend as a rock musical with Des McAnuff. I was head of Warner Brothers at the time and inherited Brad Bird. And Brad hadn't really done anything. I mean, he'd been around a long time. And I asked Brad to read this, and he came to me when we discussed a take on it. And we completely and utterly reworked the film to the extent we cut the music completely. I'm doing a little retrospective on Friday about, I'm telling one of my war stories, but it was an interesting phone call to call Pete Townsend and tell him we were going to cut all the songs from a film that he developed, and he originally had optioned the rights from Ted Hughes and then sold them on to Warner Brothers, and therefore to me. But Brad came in and we completely reworked it, but we never lost the symbolism of what the story was about at the heart of it as we developed it. So, but we felt that in the end we found something that was original. It was from something else, but we made it original. We made it standalone and we moved it into a sort of 1950s environment which we felt was a better backdrop for the story. So as you pitch, Be committed. It's very easy to get in a room and ask somebody, say, I mean, when I say something's not right, often people say to me, so what are you looking for? Well, I mean, what sort of question is that? I mean, you ask me what I'm looking for? I mean, I'll tell you that I would say, generally, as my company, I try not to limit us to anything. I mean, in principle, we make family films because when I look at the bottom line, it's a larger amount of money, and the more adult the film becomes in terms of its rating, PG-13 R, or it's X here still, is it, for the next one up? You have to cut out some revenue streams, so you do need to be. But essentially, never ask somebody what they're looking for, because you need to be committed to what you've got. And somebody might not like it, but be committed to your idea, because if you're not committed to it, nobody else is going to get anywhere near it or understand it. Be concise, because I can waffle on like crazy. Jane's already told me I've got to finish in an hour, right, this morning, so you're off. She's got the hook waiting for me. So be concise, get to the point, move on, don't... and that's the same in a pitch, because if you can give an executive some time, say it is an executive pitch, you're in a studio situation, and you've got some time, the sooner you get to the point, yes, I mean, keep that waffle down at the beginning to, show you're organized, you know who's going to speak. If there's 3 or 4 of you that you've really organized, and how long it takes. It's not, oh, I'll be quick. If somebody in the room says, oh, I'll be quick. No. What does be quick mean? Be quick to you and be quick to me is 2 different things. So try and rehearse it. Be absolutely so concise about it, to the point. And I'm going to get in a minute to what you need to say in a pitch. And don't excuse yourself, all right? So if you hear me excuse myself this morning, you have to shout out and say, oh, you're excusing yourself. I could have excused myself this morning by saying, guys, some of you were late, so the presentation I was going to do in 90 minutes, I've had to cut half an hour out, but I'm going to do my best. Because what I'm really trying to say to you is love me. It's okay, it's okay. You're okay, Max, but that's not. So it's very tempting, you're very nervous in a pitch. It's very easy just to, list all these things as to why, I got out of bed the wrong side, the bus was late. No, straight in, confident, do those things. Be committed, be concise, and don't excuse yourself. There's no need to. You're distracting from what you're doing. You're wasting time talking about your fantastic idea. Okay, and there, you see, I think I had one of those this morning. Okay, so expect the unexpected. Well, we had an unexpected. Hey, the bus was late. Something happened. Traffic in Newcastle is terrible, right? Hey, it happens. Life happens. It's how you deal with it. Hear all these little excuses I'm making to you? But it's how you deal with something that goes wrong. It could be a technical thing. Well, we had a little one, right? And then the DVD came on at the beginning. It didn't fire up properly. Richard took care of it immediately in the box. It's fine. But don't get yourself into, just be ready for it. Shit happens is the thing. Things do go wrong. It's what you do in the moment that happens that makes you great. And expect the unexpected. And do the unexpected. And that's about that indication of freshness to a pitch. There's a bit of a formula. I hear a lot of pitches and a lot of things. So I'm talking to you about style and how you should pitch something and how you should approach something. But at the bottom line is you still got to make it unique. Not cute. There's a difference between unique and being too cute. Being too clever. They've heard a lot of it before. But nevertheless, just looking for that freshness, because there's something unexpected in the idea you're pitching, right? And it's not about the fact that it doesn't obey story structure. It's about the fact there's a freshness over and above, over the top of that. All right, can you answer these questions? What have we got? I feel like a game show host, really. It's good, isn't it? You see, and the survey says, okay, who is your target audience? Well, I think that's really important. And I know the question, the answer you should never give, or give this answer at your peril. It's a family film for everyone. My question is, tell me why a 47-year-old male would like it. And you better have an answer for me. So who is your target audience? Well, your target audience should be very precise, but you want it to blend over into other demographics. But there are films, like The Incredibles. I think that's a film that genuinely reached all audiences, because you had a family of 4, and the typical family could relate to that. There was something in it for everybody. I mean, that film spoke to me, and that film was not about, that film had immortal characters discovering they were mortal. It was about age, which of course is Up has tackled a similar subject. But that, who's your target audience? It's just like, we really don't, that's the one where you can get so badly caught out. You're not really thinking through what you're doing. All right, so what is the theme? Well, I just touched on that really, a theme. It's not the plot. It's really is what are you in, you're writing a script, you're developing an idea. What are you developing? You're going to wrap it in a plot. But what, again, Incredibles. I mean, that suit he puts on for the boys in the room, that's about the fact he can't get in his wedding suit anymore. That's what it spoke to me. It's, it's about growing old. That was, it's about being unwanted. It's about unemployment, right? I felt that's what Brad was investigating in that story. Then he wraps it in The Incredibles. But it had an underlying theme, or you can do the same with Finding Nemo. What was Finding Nemo really about? Overcoming fear. Letting go of your children, letting them naturally grow up, and having to do the one. I mean, the opening of Finding Nemo, I think, is one of the most astonishing bits of filmmaking. Before the credits start, you know so much, right? Well, you killed the mother, you kidnapped the son, and we've discovered that the father is just afraid of his own shadow. He's afraid of everything. So we know everything, and then we set in motion immediately this task he has to go on. But we've done it from the point of view of character, and we know what we're exploring. So every scene in the movie is about him overcoming his fear. And that's the investigation. So that could be what, you need to be able to answer that question, no matter what it is, but what is that? What's in your story? And what is your story really about? So there's similar sort of things, though. If somebody, and you could look at them both ways, really. That's a very similar sort of question. What's it really about? What are you going after here? What are you motivated to do? And I think what happens to us in animation, the motivation can be in the art form, and we need to be very, very careful. There's no images up here from me today. It's quite deliberate. I wanted to start by showing you some clips of films reminding us that that's what ends up at the end. But it's not about imagery at this moment. You create a fantastic story. You put the tools together. You have a great script, and then you hand it to a designer to read. It's such a fantastic moment where you just think everyone's literally on the same page, right? Because you've all read the same thing. So when you come to design a character, you're doing it from the point of view of being informed about his personality. You know he's fearful. You know whatever emotion he has in there, whatever baggage he's carrying, that can enter the character design. But if you design a great world and lots of interesting things first, and then you do your story, please let the story then readjust the designs. Because if you start with this foundation, you will be in a much better place to succeed. And then can you define your story? So that comes back to the pitch, right? So there you are in that casual place. You've walked past somebody, you go, my God, that's Jeffrey Katzenberg. Or, I mean, there's all sorts of people here. There's James Baxter here. This week there's Shelley Page from DreamWorks is here. You're just sitting in the bar with them, chatting, and you want to just take that opportunity. You don't want to give away your idea for free. There's lots of do's and don'ts in all of that, but there's an opportunity to just, it's the hook really, because you're not really telling them what it's about, but you may be just, if you're out fishing, you may just be getting somebody on the hook to say, oh really? Yeah, you should come in and talk to us about that. So that idea of being able to, articulate something very simply, very concise. If you're asking for money, you better have a budget. If you're not asking for money, but trying to sell and have the idea optioned, you don't need a budget. In fact, you don't want a budget. So it's really there's a what do you want in here, deciding what you want, and then making sure you've got the materials to support what you want. So if it was if you're a student in a schedule, you better to articulate a schedule. Somebody's going to come crashing in on you about render capacity and all sorts of technical questions about whether that's realistic and everything else. So again, if you had a schedule, it better be backed up with real facts. And what do you want? What do you want out of it? I suppose, Jim, it comes back to whatever you said I'd say. You're trying to option, you're trying to sell something, you're trying to engage something. I've seen projects. Here's the producer of me speaking, saying, give me a project for free. But you have to be very, very careful that you pitch your price correctly, because you're just trying to get in. The assumption is your belief in yourself as indeed is John Lasseter's belief, or Brad Bird's belief, is it's the next film where they're really going to make the money. It's not the first one. Don't get too precious. You need to get in there. Don't sign your life away. Don't also sign your next 6 pictures away either at that price. You know, options for second, third films. What you really want to do, moment that you get an opportunity, somebody's interested, you go find an agent, because you've just circumnavigated the catch-22, which is that you have somebody who wants to buy something from you, and before you get in too deep, you say, "Oh, I have representation. Can I have them call you?" And they say yes, and then in that next few hours, you go find representation, or you would try to. I mean, that would be a way to you know, to try and open that door and get in. So, but very, you know, there is a group of you. It really is very important, and it's very easy to say, "Oh, okay, I want final cut of my movie. You know, I want this to be. I want amazing film credits and amazing this and amazing that." Be very careful you don't get too carried away in that. The most important thing is you want to get your movie sold and you want to get it made. And then just going with the knowledge, there are many films that are optioned that are never made. There are very many films that are optioned, not only never made, but you don't get them back either. They're just sitting. Because the worst thing that can happen to an executive is if he allows a film to go into turnaround. And turnaround means that the movie is bought back. You know, you can take it out, the studio might say, "Oh, I've invested £100,000, $100,000 in this project. If you can give me the money, you can have the film back." And if you've already got a side deal going with Fox or with somebody else, you might be able to do that. The money goes back. So, but the danger is is it really worth it for 100,000? I'm going to give Fox a movie that's suddenly going to be a hit? I don't think so. It's much better for me to just put it in an archive somewhere and bury it. So there's a huge amount of projects out there that are just never produced. But you don't run away from it. You understand it and you embrace it, and you understand that system which you are playing with. And that's why, as early as you can, you get an agent, because they protect you from all of those sort of things, that if it's not produced within a certain amount of years, then there are further option payments made, or indeed it just reverts to you. But the temptation in Hollywood is these options are picked up and picked up and picked up, which could be fine for you. You know, you're earning some money off it. But what you really want to do is get that first movie actually produced. Okay, title. I want you all to think about titles for your project. It's a very easy one to not have the title almost becomes part of your description of the movie. Well, it is really. And if you think of your favorite films, think of their title. And the title is normally the title character, or it describes the central action of the film. But if it gets vague, the film is somewhat unsuccessful, because it suggests the film is vague and the film doesn't quite know what it is. So you can think of your title as the first step on your pitch, really, because that's the first thing I'm going to see, right? I'm going to see the name. So if you think back through the classic animated films, and I'm going to keep us in the in the animation ranks here, but from Snow White to Bambi to Pinocchio, Cinderella, Alice in Wonderland, 101 Dalmatians, Jungle Book. There's one that's that breaks that rule. Classic piece of literature, adapted into an animated film, already brought something very famous with it. The worst title of all time, in my opinion, is Up. I could not make a film called Up, but of course the film wasn't called Up. It was called Pixar's Up, and they had earned the right to be able to call that film what they felt it should be called, and it didn't matter. For the mortals amongst us, you got to have a title that really works. I mean, any studio marketing department, had it not been Lasseter and Pixar, would have just turned around and said, "You can't call a movie Up. It can't test well." But it doesn't matter, because when they tested it, they were testing it as Pixar's Up, and everybody goes, "Oh yeah, Pixar's got another film coming out. Oh, fantastic!" And that was why we all went to see it. And it was a great film. But anyway, that's how I feel about titles, and I think you think of it as it's part of your marketing. It markets you selling the film, and it markets the studio selling the movie to an audience. So don't underestimate that. Okay, log lines. So I think, and this is some of this is debatable. as to what it is, but I like to follow this sort of process. So the log line also becomes that sort of hook, right? It's that one sentence description of your film. It could be as short as Beauty and the Beast, which we always thought was don't judge a book by its cover. Something that gives you that sense of what it is. It could be a little bit longer. It could describe a little bit of the plot, but it's incredibly concise, and it becomes the thing that your entire team can lock onto. You can summarize the project. It's your log line. Your quick pitch comes from this, being able to summarize it. This is what we're doing, and it's short. It's a sentence. It gets longer. It becomes this. It becomes the synopsis, which I'm going to give you. This is mine. I think a synopsis is an extension because I think everything's a building block on what's on the previous part of it. It could well be the log line really doesn't come first, right? The idea for your story comes first, and then you're going to go write it. And your log line is going to be a derivative of what you've written. So it doesn't necessarily, it's not going to emerge in this order. But it becomes the bank. And you can spend pieces of it. You can pull bits off that. And I think I think it's a very smart idea. I don't get treatments brought into me like this. Somebody normally sends a treatment, which I would say to them, well, that's a treatment or it's a synopsis. But it's a description of the story. But I like this idea of when you're developing something that you really have a moment, that you really explore your subject matter and explore it in the treatment. Okay, yeah, well, there's Robert McKee. I just want to credit some people here. So Robert, in this story structure class, Chris Vogler, and these last two are hand in hand. Joseph Campbell wrote in 1949, The Hero with a Thousand Faces. Chris Vogler, an executive at the Walt Disney Company in live action, wrote, based on Joseph Campbell's book and adapting it for film, wrote the Argo straight away. He's telling him. It's the moment. Shakespeare starts us off immediately in the moment before we know the character, because Rodrigo said, "Don't tell me, don't tell me." And in fact, I did a production when I was a very young man, and the director was asking for cuts, like all Shakespeare plays. You're trying to shorten them up a little bit, and one of the actors came on and they said, "Can we act out the cut?" And they did, prithee, never tell me, never tell me. And the Argo character turned around and said, "Okay, I won't." And they walked off. And they went away. They went their own separate ways, and that's the cut. You cut the play. But that inciting incident is that moment that something happens, and you've got to find it in your story. And this is why I'm keeping us completely away from artwork this morning. It's that this is where our story begins, with the inciting incident. And these are great books or programs to continue studying. But if you have Chris Vogler's book is the most succinct one. That's the home study one. You can dip into Joseph Campbell's book, and you can attend Robert McKee's story. He analyzes Casablanca, which is a very interesting analysis of a particular movie, taking you through each of these points. But it's a great thing to look at. Okay, so Brad Pitt in a movie, he needs screen time. You're going to develop and care about that character. They've got to be on the screen. And if you're servicing too many subplots and too many secondary characters, no matter how cute they are, you're not going to be able to tell your story. So it's very important, not only budget and schedule, but the reality of it. How many principal characters, number of secondary characters, number of locations, what's your build? And it's true. When somebody goes, think Tom Cruise, think Julia Roberts, and this, and this very, succinct but crazy picture, but continuing to reference other movies and develop it. And you could go on the journey with them. But that's what will happen. That's what would happen at DreamWorks. If you're trying to find funding, independent investors, perhaps even money that's outside of our industry, just remind yourself, have I gone to the movies? Jeffrey Katzenberg amazes me. He spends the weekend at the movies. He goes and sees every film. He could have copies sent to his home, but he likes to go because part of the viewing of the experience is he doesn't want to see it with a professional crowd. He could go to the Motion Picture Academy. He could go to all the places where movies are screened for the professionals. He wants to go where the public are, because he wants to get a sense of what's appealing to them and the reaction.